Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for some. Welcome, everybody. We're starting our monthly podcast today with our special guest, Linda Chan from Long Beach, California. My name is Tom Boinski. I'm representing TechEdge Dynamics and Visionaries NV. We're gonna discuss today in a very friendly, during the friendly meeting, AI in business as our monthly AI roundtable discussion mastermind. It's all about practical AI usage, use cases, implementation in daily life of business owners, business founders, startup founders. Before we're gonna move forward, just maybe a little bit about TechEdge Dynamics and Vision SV. TechEdge Dynamics is a venture studio. We're helping small and medium companies build products and make all those ideas, sometimes crazy life. Visionaries NV, as Visionaries NV, we are helping companies outside of states, United States, to land, soft land in the United States, in Las Vegas, Nevada. Okay, so without further ado, one reminder. It is not a scripted meeting, not a scripted interview. This is a friendly discussion. So I hope it will be interesting and entertaining for everybody, and you're gonna pull a lot of insights. So, Linda, welcome, welcome. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
The floor is yours. So I will skip your introduction. I believe it would be better if you're gonna say a little bit about you. So let's start maybe with your who you are and what you're doing here and where you're going.
Okay. All right. So, hello. I am Linda Chan. I'm the founder of Union Navigator Pro. I have been in the human resource role for over 15 plus years, and I have a consulting practice, Holistic People Engineering. But I would say that I'm moving into Union Navigator Pro because of a consulting project that I had back in 2023. And in fact, that consulting engagement is the inspiration or the origin story of Union Navigator Pro. I was hired in as a functional HR business partner, or excuse me, business analyst, for a HRIS implementation project with an adjacent ERP project. And so I had some responsibilities also in helping the organization, which was a large subcontractor with multiple entities, DBAs, and I would say 12 plus different trade unions across entities, over 5,000 employees. And so my task was to help them configure their HRIS system. Within a month or two, I realized that I could not configure their system. And it's not that I couldn't configure the systems because I didn't have the rules and the regulations and all of the data point. What was missing was the critical piece, and that is I discovered that they had over 80% of their workforce under union agreements. And so, because they did not have a um, depository of all of their union contracts, I essentially was left with the decision to make a recommendation to halt the actual HRIS implementation and start a side project, which ended up being more of my main project, which is to locate all of the contracts and start parsing out the rules. And so, what I've discovered is that the organization had over 150 different union contracts across 9 different states. And as I mentioned earlier, had about 12 plus trade unions. And so that project essentially was me building the rule schemas for the contracts in which they were
Hmm.
functioning under. And so it was during that exercise that I realized that I had a product. I built extensive workbooks, and I believe at the end we had about 40,000 rules established for the configuration of the HRIS system and how that ties in and maps to the ERP system as well. And so that was a 20-month process. But I've shared in the past with Tom that this is not the first time that I've done something like this. Actually, in other engagements, I've had multi-jurisdictional clients in so many different regulatory industries, nonprofit, healthcare, and so on and so forth. And I've always made it a habit to map out all of the jurisdictional rules. And mind you, when I was doing all of these things, I was not even using AI. I was literally the person to manually parse out every single one of the agreements and also determining what jurisdictional rules apply to a given client based on their location, based on their headcount, based on a number of different factors. And so it's exciting to see how the things that I've done in my 15 plus years of experience working in compliance has evolved into me being able to perform the same work that I'm doing now at a faster rate because of AI.
Very interesting. That's a really amazing story. What do you think, Linda? Where in your industry do you see AI giving the biggest advantage right now, and where it is overhyped? What do you think about this one?
Well, I definitely think that in terms of industry, I think any regulated industry would benefit from AI, but that comes with a level of precaution, right?
Hmm.
So for me, the way I approach Union Navigator Pro is that AI helps me stress test a lot of the things that I typically do as part of the translation of jurisdictional rules and determining the overlaps, if there are any, and in most cases there are always overlaps. Um, and and it helps me it helps me stress test, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, the
So the
part
whole
in which
aspect
I
of
can,
risk management, yes?
yes, well, to a certain extent, of course, right?
Hmm.
I think it helps speed up the process, but it doesn't replace judgment.
Okay, so
And
where do you
that's the part
see?
where I would say that AI definitely needs to have, there's benefits to having AI in terms of helping with the manual work, right? But I would also say that you cannot replace judgment.
Of course, yeah. So where do you see like compliance in 3 years now? In general, compliance for different industries, different domains.
Well,
Will it be totally automatic, totally AI driven, or?
definitely not. So when it comes to where AI has a part in, I guess, any regulatory environment, I think that it helps with the manual processes
Hmm.
and the way I like to measure um, how effective AI could be is by looking at it from a perspective of where can it add value and where should you have the human feedback loop, right? And
Okay.
so when you think of regulations, you think of trust, you think of accuracy, you think of deterministic, not generative, right? And so if there is a potential for any legal liability, I always like to think of it as this is where
Hmm.
AI does not replace that human judgment. Somebody that would have the expertise to really look at the output, right? So I think of AI and the way I've been using AI is by evaluating the output. So if the output is going to create some sort of risk, that's always a signal to me that we need a human being to review this and
Gotcha.
judgment
Gotcha.
needs to be applied in that type of situation,
Okay, thank you.
right?
So let's move forward and let's move forward around AI. But the last question from my side regarding compliance, the complexity, what would be your advice to somebody who's running real operations and managing real compliance complexity within the company? What should be the next move for such person? Is Union Pro navigator thing to explore?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question again?
Uh, for anyone running real operations right now and managing
Mhm.
real compliance complexity, what will be your advice? What should be the next move? Maybe Union Navigator Pro should be the next move.
Well, I do think that in terms of managing compliance and
Hmm.
using I typically look at it as there is going to be a lot of nuance that AI will not know, right?
Hmm.
And so when you're using I frequently find myself having to pressure test a whole lot, right? And there's a lot of context that AI will not know. And those are the things that you have to know as you're using AI as a tool. That a generic answer is not going to account for, like, for example,
Hmm.
I'll just give it a very simple example. You have like a specific client who has, and you're trying to identify all of the jurisdictional rules that apply to them, right?
Hmm.
And so you want to have that context in which you evaluate that. Even without AI, you still have to have the judgment to say, okay, this organization is based in Long Beach, California.
Hmm.
This organization has over 50 employees and you start asking yourself questions about the context, right? And then when you're prompting an AI, you want to make sure that AI understands the context in which they're evaluating, because if you're asking a generic question to AI, this company is based in Long Beach, what are all the labor laws that apply to them, right? It's going to
Hmm.
give you a long list. And anyone in compliance, especially in human resource compliance, will know that to determine which laws apply to you, you also have to add other contexts, right?
Exactly. Context is the key here. Yeah.
Context is the key because if you don't know what to ask and how to frame it in your prompt, then more than likely the output is not going to give you an accurate picture. But I will say that even when I do add context in my prompting, um, sometimes, and this is where, I talk about discernment, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes the output doesn't make sense to me. And it's being able to look at the output and say, wait, that's not correct. It cannot be correct.
Hmm.
And I think that's the important piece too, is not to rely heavily on just the output, but also in your day-to-day judgment. And I always go back to the days when we didn't have AI
Like
as a
common sense. You mean common sense?
Well, common sense, but I think it has a lot to do with judgment and discernment, right? It's being able to
From the
apply,
professional perspective? From the professional
right, from
perspective.
the professional and from the expertise level,
Okay.
right? Because you don't want to trust 100%. I think with me and I love AI, but at the same token, I am also very um, cautious
Hmm.
of all of the outputs that I get because if something doesn't read correctly to me after I've done my prompting and given it enough context that I think that I should be able to, there's always a case in where I may forget another set of context and then I
Hmm.
continue adding to that particular, chat log or chat history, right? And so,
Gotcha.
and then as you continue the conversation, you're going to add much more layers to your first prompt. And it's being able to look at the output and decide whether or not it's giving you a complete story or if something is off base. I think that's important as well. Because I think when you're talking about like risk management, we're talking about money here. We're talking about financial risk, right?
Responsibility,
And accountability and
accountability, yes.
yes. So I think that's where I love AI, but I also know its limitation. And I know where I myself have to practice my own discernment and judgment to be able to get the right output and to pressure test it in a way where if the output doesn't sound right or if it doesn't click, and I might not know in the moment what is off, but I know something is off.
Gotcha.
And I
That's
think
a
that's an
very, very
important piece.
wise. That's a very wise advice. Thank you much, Linda, for this one. One remark to everyone who's listening to us: if you would like to ask some question, please drop it in the question answer section. You can click the button over here and drop a question. Linda, so now more about you as a business owner, business operative. Tell us a little bit about your story with AI, so your history. So when did you start? You started with what kind of a tool? What was the process behind you picking up the right tool for you? Give us some, give us some like stories about Linda and AI. So we would love to hear what you're using right now. Maybe you can recommend something for other business people, business operatives, people who like running businesses. Maybe there's like something very specific you're using every day, which is very helpful for you to be more efficient daily.
Yes.
Share with us.
Okay, so I must admit that I only started using AI a little over a year ago, and ChatGPT was definitely my first.
Hmm.
um,
Don't worry, a lot of people still they are not using AI. I think I saw yesterday a survey, a very fresh recent survey. My apologies, I don't remember the source, but it was something like this about people in the United States. Like 37 people are using, and something around the same 37, 35 are not using at all. So it's still like something we should all embrace. So don't worry about this. There's a lot of people who are not using AI still.
yeah. Well, I started using ChatGPT, and then evolved into me using AI meeting note takers, right?
Hmm.
And then, in terms of the evolution of my usage of AI, I've moved into using Notebook. Um, I think it's LLM.
Ah, the
And
Google Notebook. The,
yes, Google
the Google
Notebook.
one. Yeah, yeah.
And I've also started using Perplexity, and now I'm very big on, I would say, I use ChatGPT less now. My two primary, I would say LLMs that I use would be Claude and also Perplexity. And I think
Gotcha.
because Perplexity is known for market analysis,
Hmm.
anything that requires citation, I've also, expanded because I am in compliance and that's what my domain expertise is in. I've moved into using OpenCase, Westlaw, LexisNexis as my reference, my actual
Hmm.
regulatory
Hmm.
references. Um, and I would say I manage my business essentially by using Notion. I'm very heavy on Notion as well. And I think it works wonders because it's really where I'm capturing a lot of my domain expertise in a document, in a shared workspace, right? And I would say those are like my favorite tools. And in fact, I would even say that sometimes I may have one prompt, but I am essentially putting that same prompt into, let's say, Perplexity and also Claude, just to look at what the difference would be in terms of the output.
Hmm.
And it helps me to see two different outputs because one might have a little bit more emphasis in a specific area. And it just, I feel like I'm constantly with my tools that I use, um, I'm constantly in this going through rabbit holes, I guess you could say,
Hmm.
because it makes me more curious to know how much further I can go with this and how deep does it get when I'm trying to operationalize a lot of the compliance language. So I think I think just being able to pressure test with multiple services. And mind you, Tom, I do not use the free accounts. Like I think just
Hmm.
because of the fact that I
Yeah,
am
this is very
looking
important. This is very important probably for everyone around. Like we have so many different tools. Sometimes I hear from different people they are totally lost. Where should they try? What should they try? How they should start even. There's always this kind of a question after like a little bit of time of adaptation. Should I pay for it or should I use free one? What's your take on this? For somebody who's heavy lifting with AI, should we pay? Do you see any difference using those tools for free or paying for them?
well, I think for my decision to go with the enterprise version of any of my AI tools is simply because I am using AI for a very sensitive topic.
Hmm.
And privacy is very important to me. And also because Union Navigator is essentially building um, a compliance intelligence layer that doesn't exist today in the market, I also have to look at it from a perspective of, am I training my LLMs using a
Yeah, with your
public
data.
data
You
set
you can
or
always turn it off. You can always turn it off. There's like a setting in all all chatbots, data or memory. You can
exactly.
turn it off. So this is very important take for everyone who's listening to us. Remember, if you're working with sensitive data, turn off the data sharing option or memory option. It's different name for this feature in different for different chatbots. For ChatGPT, because I'm using ChatGPT as my number one to go. Under setting, it's in under data and privacy. You can turn off sharing
Mm,
your data with OpenAI's learning machine, let's call it, to train
absolutely.
LLM over your data. So just remember to turn it off. Memory, this is something we can discuss. We all have our own preferences. Somebody would love to have the memory on, to know, to have the same answers over again. But for me, if I'm using AI chatbots for different professional tasks, I prefer always prompt exactly give the context for every single prompt. But that's me. So we all use LLMs different ways. Okay, Linda, very important one. I have to ask you, what do you think about the future and AI? Do you think AI is something that we should like be aware of? It's scary, or it's very optimistic regarding job market, or business as usual? Do you see there are more like the future is bright with AI, or we should basically stay focused and observe? What's your take? Maybe start with
Well,
workforce. Do you think AI will take over some jobs in the future?
I do believe that there will be um, jobs that would have to, I mean, there are several. I mean, Claude has already published their charts on
Yeah,
like what fields and
yeah,
occupations would be
yeah,
greatly
yeah,
impacted with the capabilities of AI today, right?
yeah.
And so I think from an HR standpoint, and this is what I've been honing on to for a lot of my HR clients, and even as I'm looking at what I've done in terms of my origin story or my client that inspired Union Navigator Pro, is looking at redefining roles, right? Because I think that even though a lot of the manual work are the types of positions that would be taken over by AI. I think it allows for essentially, I would say, an upgrade or a what is the word that I'm looking for? And it's evading me right now. Essentially, you're going to have to upskill your workforce
Hmm.
because the types of skills, knowledge, like the knowledge, your KSAOs, right? Your knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics are going to be, um, it would need to be more advanced, right? So instead of being the one to actually do the manual work, I see the role evolving into a bigger role, which is going to require the judgment, the domain expertise, the oversight of AI models. um, that's where I would say, if I'm speaking of HR, for example, right? So
Mm-hmm.
rather than processing the open enrollment paperwork, maybe what they're doing is something of what I've been doing throughout my entire career, which would be to pressure test a lot of these AI models that are taking over the manual work to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that the process and the workflow isn't broken and to be able to identify pretty quickly the root cause if there is an error in the process in itself, right? So evolving from actually doing the paper pushing into a role that requires a lot of, I would say, knowledge and expertise to manage the models in which that are handling these manual processes.
Gotcha. So, as far as I understand, professionals are safe. Like multiple years of experience, being like absolute a professional in one domain. Such people will be safe because there's always gonna be need for experience,
Absolutely. I
deep
don't think you
experience in the field.
can replace humans
Mm-hmm.
because if you're looking at it from a perspective of managing risk and understanding where the system breaks, I think
Mm-hmm.
it takes you into more of kind of like so I have a Lean Six Sigma green belt and I'm always
Mm-hmm.
thinking about continuous improvement,
Gotcha.
operational excellence, right? So it just takes the position of something that would be more of an administrative function
Mm-hmm.
and enabling with AI, okay, you're not going to be processing enrollments anymore, but now you're moving into a level in which you're actually optimizing for operational excellence.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that requires um, a level of expertise.
Gotcha, understood. Let's move
And
to
I
this
just don't think
something
AI
something
would.
easier. Something easier. Let me ask you about your any kind of situation you were in with AI using AI. during your business tasks. Were there any situations that were somehow negative, like you were expecting to achieve something, and you had some troubles, something was not clear, AI somehow wasn't too much helpful. Are there any situation that you remember having some troubles to pull the best outcomes of AI, or some kind of situations super funny, or which were like, those, like, happy moments for you with AI?
Well, I think for me, AI, so I talked a lot about pressure testing,
Have you
excuse me,
have you ever been
testing.
surprised positively and negatively? Maybe like this, just to simplify the question.
Well, I think I'm always surprised because I'm always looking for,
Hmm.
um, I guess you could say the output. Like I really do scrutinize the output. And it's
Okay,
because
okay.
I recognize that I might not in the moment as I'm prompting or
Have you
putting
ever
together
cross-checked? Have you
prompts.
ever cross-checked the output, like with different?
Yes, yes, that's what I mentioned earlier, where I might have one prompt and I might, what I will do is take that one prompt, put it in Claude, and then put the same prompt in Perplexity, and then I cross-check.
Okay, interesting
And I
practice.
would say
Okay.
a funny story is that I've been told by multiple LLM models, so whether
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
Claude or if it's ChatGPT or if I'm using Perplexity,
Hmm.
it's hilarious because I'm constantly correcting AI that, and I happen to have my memory saved that it's telling me to go to sleep.
Interesting. Maybe you're
The
using too
output
much.
would be Linda, go to sleep. And
Okay.
it's because I'm constantly correcting it. Because certain things might be taken out of context,
Yeah.
and I might have a specific ask and it gives me a different output. And so I have a history, a long history with all of the AI models that I've used where I'm constantly correcting it
Oh wow.
and
Do you think
reporting.
AI is a little bit addictive? Like, I have like this kind of feeling now. Are we overusing AI sometimes?
I actually think that in some ways, I don't want to say I'm addicted to AI, but it does help from an efficiency
Hmm.
standpoint, right? Um, so for me, I know its limitation, and the
Hmm.
limitation is exactly what I'm sharing with you in terms of the funny incidents where I would actually get, feedback from, or like the output would be, go to sleep, Linda. And
So
it's
you
because
you
I'm
like to
constantly.
work late at night? Gotcha.
Yes, I do my best thinking. I call it my prime time. I do my best thinking at night. But I think that I really want like accuracy
Hmm.
is very important for what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Hmm.
And I hold myself accountable as that domain expert to be able to generate the right output considering all factors, right?
Gotcha.
And so when I am prompting, I'm hyper aware of the outputs. And my history with AI, especially when it comes to this sensitive data, not necessarily employee data, but I mean just sensitivity around how you go about interpreting um, jurisdictional rules or labor contracts and so on and so forth. I'm constantly having to correct the interpretation or add more context so that the right output
Hmm.
um, is delivered, right?
Gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
so that's my funny, it's I don't know if I want to describe it as a love-hate relationship. I love it, but then at the same time, I also know its limitation.
Okay. So
And
okay. The
I've
trust is
learned,
very important for you, so you have to be absolutely sure.
well, yes, absolutely. I think that even without AI, trust was a big factor in everything I've done without AI in the pass. And so with AI and knowing that there is a statistic is out there, right? And I don't know the exact statistics, but we're talking about 80%, somewhere in the ballpark of 80% of
Hmm.
models hallucinating. That concerns me. And I think that because I'm very big on delivering value to my clients, I want to make sure that whatever I'm producing that came from AI is also as good as I could have delivered when we didn't have AI, when AI was
Okay,
not part of
okay.
my day to
Fair
day,
enough.
right?
Okay. Thank you, Linda. That was
Sure.
really, really, really interesting to hear all those stories from you. We will wrap up this meeting. I have one last question, one last basically favor to ask you from our audience. Tell us just a little bit how exactly you're gonna incorporate AI within Union Navigator Pro, and tell us where you're at exactly, on which stage you are exactly right now, and what you're looking for, what kind of your next steps are for your startup.
So with Union Navigator Pro, I have built, as I mentioned earlier, extensive workbooks. Um, and so right now, the build is focused more on the deterministic modeling based on the many Excel workbooks that I've developed, where I've actually mapped out a lot of these roles, right? And the goal is to incorporate AI, but I think there's a level of responsibility and it requires sequencing. And so we want to make sure that the deterministic model first supports the operational needs for our future pilot customers. Accuracy is very big, and I've repeated that many, many times. And so we believe having a deterministic model, starting with that first, pressure testing it, is the best way to go before we start introducing LLMs into the infrastructure build. And I think that just because I have multiple different AI services that I've used and that I have a history of constantly correcting AI when
Hmm.
the output is incorrect, I think we're already it's not working simultaneously in a sense in terms of Union Navigator Pro and what we have now versus what it's going to be in the future. But I'm already starting the process in terms of training my LLMs with the knowledge that I've already created over the last year or so. And so we're not starting from scratch. It's a sequencing of when the is really the right time to start introducing the LLMs. And I would also like to say that, you know, we're not moving towards actually building agents, right? Um, we're building the upstream layer first and ensuring accuracy to before we even think about introducing agents.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, Linda, thank you very much for today. It's a great pleasure to have this conversation with you, and
Thank you.
much appreciated for this meeting. Uh, Thank you one more time, and everybody. Oh, thank you also, John. I'll see you next month with new guests, or maybe also with Linda. Maybe we're gonna do like a session with multiple startup founders or business operatives, entrepreneurs. Linda, thank you one more time. Hope to see you soon. Thank you everybody for attending, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.